One away. We're going to call this meeting to order. This is the December 15th, 2025 New Garden Township Board of Supervisors monthly meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The board has not had any executive sessions since last month. Next agenda item is public comment on anything other than agenda items. Do we have anybody with public comment? Okay, now we'll have public comment on agenda items. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mickey Thompson. I'm the Vice President of Land Development and Counsel for Keystone Custom Homes. We are presently engaged in doing site work construction for the Stonebridge community down on Thompson Road. We've been working for about a year, doing all the site work, getting all the utilities, water, electric, sewer, all that fun stuff in. And we are at the point now where curbing has been, or is in the process of being installed. We are this week to start installing stone, and hopefully before Christmas we'll be starting the first part of paving, trying to beat the weather before it gets too obnoxious. You know, this time last year I was playing golf, so it's just kind of funny how this all crept up on us. But working with the township staff, and we have our permitting department from Keystone Custom Homes, we've had submitted building permits in for a time. And we're trying to get some sort of schedule as to when these building permits can be released. We've met all of our requirements under the development agreement that we've signed with the township as of last year. We have security posted for all the work that's been done out or to be done out there at the site. Under the NPC, that's what is required of us. And that is sort of why we're here. We're sort of in a stalemate right now as to when these building permits can be released. And the pump and haul agreement that Attorney Sebastian was quite wonderful in getting that through. I think that might be something that you might be signing or in a process of signing tonight. That was something that we discovered back in September that, well, wait a minute, Aqua's not going to allow us to connect until we have 5 homes, so we need one of these agreements. So it was a modification of what the process was, but I think we're at the point now where we want to start building our homes. We're trying to beat the weather. We're trying to get all of these infrastructure items in, and just would like a roadmap of to when that could be, like at what point when stone gets laid into the roads there, will these building permits be released? And that's sort of why I'm here. We're really struggling. Sales are lagging behind right now because our customers don't have a model home to go and see what the community is going to be like. We've been pressing for that for a while, but here we are.
So I think that you've been working with Robert Weir and the township engineer on those issues. So typically a board of supervisors does not intervene in their code enforcement officer and their engineer's determination. So I think it's up to Robert and Nate, our engineer, as to when those get issued. But Robert, do you have anything to speak to that? I think you've been talking to him, so it's really not something the Board of Supervisors would address at a meeting. It's more with the staff.
Well, I understand that. Unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of cooperation in terms of the contact coming to me via phone, emails. And I'm the one running the department, and I can't get people on the phone to talk to me. You know, when we first came into the community, we had a wonderful meeting about communication being something that was really stressed, and I think we've tried to over communicate to let the township and its staff know where we are. And as of today, I'm still not getting direct communication from anyone. I'm hearing from other people, and it's costing us time. And now that the winter is here, even though it's not the 21st yet, we're starting to suffer, and that's why I'm here before the township tonight.
I understand that, but again, those duties are the responsibilities of the code enforcement officer and the zoning officer, and then if it's an engineering question, the engineer. So it would not be appropriate for this board to address those because
Well,
that's what
I
they're standing.
will say one thing. So I don't believe it's the engineer or the township's zoning officer to determine whether or not we're meeting all four corners of the development agreement that we've submitted and signed. The township did sign that as well as, Mr. Heim. So, that's where we are right now because we have a signed agreement that under the MPC, I'm entitled to my building permits. You have surety. And if they're not cooperating with me, I have really no other choice but to come here and ask for the township's help.
Well, I think that's not correct. I think, yes, you do have a financial security agreement in place. Financial security is in place. That's a guarantee to us that you perform the public improvements as you're required to do. As to the issuance of the building permits, that's on our code enforcement officer and our engineer's determination if there's some kind of issue. So I'm not exactly sure what you seek to accomplish here, but it would be absolutely inappropriate for this board to address your comments at this time. I have spoken to your attorney, and that's the correct avenue.
Okay. But even in the message that you left, there was really not a determinate point as to when building permits would be released. And that's, again, why I feel the need to be here and express that to the township.
I understand you've done that now. You've expressed it, that the board now hears that you're dissatisfied with the issuance of your building permits. But again, there is no provision anywhere in any statute or any ordinance that would authorize this board to take any action. A, it's not on the agenda, and B, there is no situation anywhere in which this board would take an action based upon your request tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you very much.
No other public comment on agenda items, right? Okay, moving on. We don't have any public hearing recognitions. Item number 8 is a presentation from Stonewall Capital. Ray?
And this was just more of a update, more so than an actual formal presentation, just to clarify.
Yes, good evening. I just wanted to come up and give you an update on where we are, what has transpired since the last time we were up here. A week ago, Friday, we settled the property, so our company is the title owner of the property. In doing so, we also executed an agreement with Aqua, which I had represented to you all that was coming, so that also happened. The benefit of the Aqua agreement, not only will it give capacity to White Clay Point, but we negotiated additional capacity for the township, as I also had previously represented. We've coordinated a meeting with the president of Aqua and Chris and myself to further that relationship too. So I'm hopeful that conversation is positive and leads to some more positive conversations. Another couple of quick updates. We have continued to meet with Somerset Lakes community to listen to their concerns, and we'll be doing so on a quarterly basis going forward. We also recently met with the Historical Commission, and we've taken some vendors already through both the Rowan House and the barn. Part of the representation that we've made is that we're going to stabilize both of those properties, so we're already starting that process. Want to make sure everybody knows that we have a website. We'll continue to update that website with regards to our schedule. We plan to be in front of the Planning Commission hopefully in March. So we will have submissions to the Planning Commission in February to continue with our engineering. I will email a schedule to both Chris and Robert so you all have it. And as the updates on the schedule occur, we will update the website just to keep everybody on board. We have had some more conversations with some of the potential retail partners. Those conversations to continue to be fruitful, especially now that we've got the Aqua agreement in place. The Aqua agreement really is the thing that's opening up this development. So I just wanted to come here and say thank you to you all for working with us and to assure you that this type of communication will continue. Any questions or? All right, that was easy.
No, thank you.
Thank
You,
you.
Ray?
Happy holidays.
Yes, thank you very much.
Next, we have the minutes. Could I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the November 17th, 2025 Board of Supervisors meeting?
Motion to adopt the minutes as submitted from November 17th of 2025.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we have the treasurer's report. Can I have a motion to approve the paid invoices in the amount of $592,002.16 and unpaid invoices in the amount of $238,935.91? Steve, do you want to make your statement?
Yeah, there is one invoice there for the company that I work for, my employer, in the amount of $326.95. I will refuse from taking action on that.
So is there a motion to approve the paid and unpaid invoices in the amounts I cited?
I'll make a motion to approve in the amount you cited.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstention.
No public safety report this month. Chris, we'll move it over to you for the monthly department report for the month of November.
And I'll keep this brief, so real quick, good evening, board, residents, staff, Chris Himes, Township Manager. This was just a kind of a month-over-month routine update in terms of just the ongoing matters of the township. I just wanted to quickly highlight some event sequences in terms of updates here that we normally kind of also cover in terms of planning for the kind of larger level board meetings. So for those not informed, this upcoming Wednesday is the take 3 or 4 of the public hearing number 3 for the Planning Commission's review in order to recommend to the Board of Supervisors the zoning ordinance and map update process. So that has been advertised. We'll re-advertise it. I believe the agenda finally hit all the postings today. So everybody should have the meeting materials for that, but that has been ongoing. And it's in sequence with what we did in terms of the very beginning of the month, which was that kind of special public task force meetings that have that public dialogue about final kind of input, specifically in this case, really kind of what we're coming down to with uses on the limestone proposed district area as well as the village gateway. So all that expected to, again, be reviewed at the Planning Commission this upcoming Wednesday. And we're doing it on this Wednesday instead of the last Wednesday, because the fourth one, because it's Christmas Eve. So with that, of course, then that would be enabled to the board to convene. We won't have to convene a special meeting for the board to do that kind of final review before nominating or recommending it for final review. So we'll plan to do that at the monthly January 20 meeting. But once again, we're doing it on the 4th Monday because the 3rd Monday is on Martin Luther King Day. So we will be advertising that meeting to be on the 4th Monday. That's a standard Board of Supervisors meeting, but we'll have it within the agenda there, that kind of agenda packet for the ability to do that final recommendation. And that really initiates the 45-day review process. So the ordinance essentially gets locked at that point, goes to the Chester County Planning Commission for review and inputs as well. Obviously, public comments on it, which probably at this point are pretty exhaustive in terms of total public comments on that ordinance. So really that moves it to the March 16th meeting, obviously the 3rd meeting, normal public hearing number 4. This is the final also kind of consultant supported by the scope of work. So Michael Baker will be here at this meeting, but what I can do is I can actually, if you would rather have him at this meeting instead, when you're gonna pretty much nominate the thing, I can have them meet for this one as well. So just let me know which one you would prefer. And then obviously, these are just the Christmas and New Year's Eve holidays, but of course, the organization meeting, everyone's favorite date of the year, is the first Monday available on the calendar year cycle for the beginning of January, so that'll be on Monday, January 5th. And of course, that's the normal like reappointments for the kind of vendor positions and everything else we do to solidify the outlook for the year. So that's really just the high level calendar updates. Trying to remember, during some of the public updates, I thought this was a pretty clear indication that everybody wants to see the Baltimore Pike Newark Road intersection fixed. So we had a massive uptick in Facebook engagement. And that was the premium post, if you will, kind of put out there. So it's interesting to see that. I expect this to precipitously drop for this month going forward. Nothing real out of the realm in terms of the normal monthly tracking that we do for applications and metrics in terms of what we track as staff. But one thing that we're continuing to do is kind of build out like a regional assessment for activity at our airport, using some of the updates we have in terms of the softwares in place now and a lot of the measurements. But one thing I thought was pretty neat to see was in terms of just total footprint for New Garden Flying Field. So it's one where we cater towards a much more broader regional audience. And this is just one where you can understand this is where we're pulling from. So we're getting really people from kind of all mid-Atlantic region, not necessarily just people within Southeast Pennsylvania. And this is just an indication of the fact that we do have a pretty strong maintenance support function at the airport, specifically in this case, installations of a more premium item, if you will, because we're a certified Garmin avionics installation crew. So we can cut kind of custom panels and do inlays that you can't really get a kind of a, think of it like an automobile service shop. We cater towards a premium version of that at New Garden. So it gets us pretty strong on book, which correlates to the fact that we get a significant amount of orders of Garmin sales when we're only required to get $100,000 per year. So it's a pretty good effort by them in moving the ability to have more services provided through the flying field. So I just thought that was pretty neat. Although the premium audience for us, and the primary one, excuse me, is our actual certified flight instructors in our flight school. And that was really it. Kenny's gonna be talking a little bit about update about this bucktail pipe one, but just know that we're out there replacing certain pipes. But that's one of the agendas for tonight, is to talk about kind of this installation and kind of some reversioning of the plan here. But all that's to say that, you know, still continues to be a pretty active need for significant stormwater pipe replacement throughout the entire township. And we're doing pretty much one at a time right now for, I think, Kenny, like probably hundreds and hundreds of pipes throughout the entire township. So any questions about the month over month kind of metrics in terms of just manager report items?
Yeah, just a quick clarification. So
Sure.
if the planning commission advances the ordinance to the Board of Supervisors, there is then a 45-day review period, not a requirement to adopt it in 45 days, but a review period. And then my question would be for Winnie, if there are changes that the board makes, does it then have to go back to the planning commission or to the county,
Yeah.
but not the New Garden?
Once it jumps to this phase, it kind of lives here as an iterative process based off of you're doing your nominated type of things, and whatever would possibly take place, freezes, goes to this one for final approval, and it's one where if it's not voted upon, it goes back to here, and it has to go back to the county. So you're just kind of cycling that forward.
So
if that
in-
makes sense.
Yeah, if, right. But, and then the county strictly comments on it. We acknowledge the comments. We're not bound to make the changes that the county wishes. Perfect.
Yep.
That's all.
It's
And the
an added resource.
if adopted, the law says you adopt an ordinance that does not comply with the comprehensive plan, it
Consistent.
doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Comprehensive plan is just a plan, and there is no requirement, and no ordinance would be invalid because it doesn't comply with the comprehensive.
Thank you.
That's all I had for it. There's no further questions.
Nope.
And
No
just
for
to
me.
summarize, for the year's worth of metrics, what we'll do is roll up the entire 12 months worth of inputs and kind of show kind of a year end type thing as well.
Perfect.
There's no unfinished business this month. Moving into new business, item 14. First item is adopting the fiscal year 2026 budget in the amount of 14.6 million. Chris, did you want to make some comments here?
This is essentially just a abridged version, if you will, of the presentation that was done in October. So really, it's just kind of pulling those summary slides kind of out of a much longer and larger brief. We're gonna, just to kind of refresh everyone's memories, because we went from October doing the advertisement, which requires a 30-day review, but we didn't have the timing in between the October advertisement and the November monthly meeting, because it was shorter than 30 days. So this was technically the first day that we could adopt, but technically, you know, we have been, no comments, no public inputs. The thing's been available for review for now almost 2 full months, and, you know, we're kind of at the end state here. This summarizes the level of inputs and discussions that have been had at the township in terms of materials available for review, as well as inputs in terms of kind of breaking and chunking down the budget into pieces before we put it all together, and the work sessions that we had to do those discussions. So overall, the proposed budget, if you can think about it, there's kind of two year-over-year jumps in terms of just the increases for public safety service for the most part on the fire EMS side, mostly on the EMS in terms of just continuing to add to the level of resources needed to be able to continue to man shifts needed for the calls for service increases, as also the volunteerism kind of has replaced full-time staff. And then of course the jump for police, which was more about this case, it was the 25 to 26 step increase per this terms of this collective bargaining agreement. So those more kind of incremental changes. Otherwise, the other largest input was we had banked from 24, not banked per se, but we essentially had based off of overperformance for some permits in terms of in-years, because we had the kind of all the school permits for the building of the school kind of hit at one time. We had a surplus, and we took that surplus and kind of chunked it up into three different, we'll call them structural use of cash, which essentially gave us kind of a glide path into actual year-over-year revenues would kind of increase along with expenditures. So we no longer need that because permits are coming in from other projects that have got activated. So what we're going to do is essentially, instead of phasing those in with 3 years of using cash to balance our budget, we're solidifying everything and using it to what its ultimate biggest need is a transfer to capital reserve. So we're doing a 1-year transfer to capital reserve to support our much larger initiative, which is making sure we have a solid cash plan for our ongoing needs for replacements in our capital plan as well. So this kind of summarizes all of the net changes. There is also a personnel increase. For last year we did 2.5, so this year we're jumping it up to 4 just to keep up with COLA kind of increases. And of course, all of this was able to be done with no property tax increase for us as well. Of course, that was announced at the October meeting as well. So with that, this is the larger level of the game plan, but as you can see, the biggest jump here was in capital and transfers. And that's, of course, as we'll get to it here in a second, that infusion of cash now in our capital plan in terms of how we use it for mostly towards paving program projects and stormwater repairs. The more upfront we have, the leaner, we don't lean down as much as possible into the future. So it gives us in a much more, we'll call it a increased of the floor, if you will, without having to bottom out our cash position for funding capital moving forward. Of course, if anybody wants to understand where we get the majority of our revenues, it comes from majority earned income tax, only 30% from property tax, the rest of it coming from stronger performance for permits and revenues. And then, of course, the increase in cash was because we had the increase of the infusion of cash, but normally that would go back down. Although over time, we do want to increase this number because we want to have a more stable ability to kind of consistently used transfers into our capital plan from our general fund revenues. And so that's kind of the net picture. As you can see, that was a lot smaller last year. It's bigger this year. Otherwise, you can always kind of think of it, and that's because this was about 68 and 69%, almost 70. The way I always like to think of it is essentially over 2/3 of our budget is catered towards public safety services as well. In terms of what we're funding for capital, it's something that people always want to know. You can think of it like 80% in this bandwidth right here is streets, paving, stormwater, paving, streets, paving and streets and stormwater. It's the primary SAP on our capital management plan here, which is also based off of the inputs of the community survey, what residents want to see most. They want to see replacement of their infrastructure. But at some point, based off, and you'll see here in a second, our cash plan, we want to make sure that we're building back up our reserve position. So part of our long-term capital plan is to make sure that we are transferring more money into our capital reserve position as well. So that's quote unquote a net future expenditure. And of course, this comes from a blended amount of income. The biggest one for the most part isn't necessarily what we're pulling from future general fund revenue needs. We're also consistently taking that net principal balance of the remnant portion of the sewer funds from the sale of the sewer system that we have about in a principal amount, 22 million. We're just continually year over year, multiple tranches, just reinvesting that in buckets to generate all of this additive cash, because it's basically we're taking that and putting it into our roadways. And of course, in terms of added transfers, This number now today infuses this stack of cash, and then we basically spend it down based off of that year's worth of expenditures in order to basically replace it consistently with additive cash from that next year, so on and so forth, until we can get into a very stabilized floor that allows us to possibly even address other matters, but doesn't actually mean it's easier to do long-term planning when you have a net floor that's higher. If this was down towards the 100,000s or zeros, you'd have a much smaller room for error as well. So this is also build some flexibility into our future capital plans. Because of course, for the most part, these things don't get cheaper over time. These are all estimates. 3 years from now, this number could be a lot bigger for some of these categories. So you want to give yourself a little bit of a margin for error. In terms of enterprise funds, open space. Open space has been a discussion basically about what to use for the in-year use of revenues as a function of, number one, we have to have operating demand capacity need to manage our open spaces. Two, we're implementing projects into open space properties, particularly in this case, our 2 park master plans. And then 3, to have amount of money left over in order to be able to buy more open spaces. So we're kind of dipping into that fund 3 times in terms of in-year. So what we're using for that 25% rule for Act 32, which is essentially we're leveraging the net accrued amount of the fund balance in terms of 25% of that, most of it, or excuse me, a third of it being primarily for your operating demand. Basically, it's staffing, personnel, people, equipment, things needed to be able to manage the property, giving us some remnant amount of additive capacity to infuse towards, hey, if we have a property of interest coming online, you know, we still have remnant funds to structure into a financial mechanism for right now, which is primarily to continue our trails plan, as well as potential opportunities for future fee simple purchases. So open space demand has not gone away. It's just being managed in a different process. But all in all, like kind of our capital plan, it's about having in-year and future flexibility, but also meeting your operating demands. The airport fund, this one is essentially just a year-over-year kind of continuation of the existing plan for the operations side of the airport. So just necessarily showing folks that we do have and have consistently have the ability to plan for in-year and future surpluses for the airport, because those surpluses become the revenue share for the airport to be able to fund its own capital implementations for projects where we get a significant amount of funding from the state. We need to have that consistent ability to show that 10% local match for the most part, kind of on average, in order to do replacements of capital assets and implementations of capital equipment at the airport. So this is just kind of show that it's a solvent plan based off of the ability to manage in-year operation demands and your capital demands solely funded only by airport revenues per the terms of the grant that was able to purchase the property in the first place. Then we just have our legacy fire hydrant fund. This is just for the management of paying for the water bill for the properties eligible for the tax, no net changes. And then the sewer fund is a remnant kind of essentially at some point can be decommissioned fund in terms of we had some FY 23 and 22, some legacy kind of contract engineering expenses. Basically, it was just making sure that everything migrating to our AQUA was done. But as you can see, that is pretty much metered out to net zero now. So we keep something in there, but we don't necessarily have an active use for it. And our net position, if you think about it in terms of total amount of stacked kind of assets for the township, we have kind of a net cash, total ones less that larger sewer principal, and then our liquid cash as well. So this is kind of our true operating cash position, of which it's pretty much near 40-60 between capital, excuse me, general fund and capital. We have about 2.5 or 6 million in our general fund position, and about, yeah, here you go, excuse me, that's as of this year. We'll update this for the year end for this upcoming year at the end for next year's view here. But all in all, you know, kind of managed to be in a more stable position moving forward. And those are just the net proposed changes. So without further ado, are there any questions? Sorry, I just wanted to get through that because I feel like we've been saying this over and over and over again since about May. So.
Thank you, Chris.
No question.
So next we need to consider the approval.
The motion to approve it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2026 budget in the amount of $14,635,490.37?
I'll make a motion to approve the budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is Resolution 2025-18, the fiscal year 2026 real estate tax rate.
I'll make the motion. There's no change.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
We normally do that view that shows kind of the general fund component that we align with uses for fire services as well. So it's just kind of showing kind of what that millage breakdown is in terms of general purpose versus dedicated towards fire and EMS.
Next, is there a motion to approve Resolution 2025-19 for the fiscal year 2026 real estate tax collector?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we've got Resolution 2025-20, which is the fiscal year 2026 fee schedule. Chris, any comment on that?
No, we just had some minor changes to some of the permits, fees. Just basically, we continue to just do a year-over-year assessment of the region. And I think in this case, it's all kind of just keeping it commensurate with everyone else is moving. So, but no overall significant changes. There's just a couple components here and there.
Great. Is there a motion to approve the Resolution 2025-20 for the fiscal year 2026 fee schedule?
I'll make a motion to approve the fee schedule.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, Resolution 2025-21, which is the personnel manual amendment.
So we did meet annually with so we do a risk control assessment survey with Delaware Valley Trust, which is our insurance agency company that basically comes out every beginning of November. They also work for the Southern Chester County Regional, and they kind of look at us comprehensively, not just necessarily facilities and management of that from a liability standpoint, but also our policies. One of them, which is just making sure that we're incorporating needed changes for recommendation for policies. Of course, AI use was one of them. You can see this is probably one where everyone's having to kind of raise their awareness about the appropriate use of these technologies in the government space. It's just kind of funny that we had this conversation about the potential of adopting some software capabilities for the township last month. But all in all, it's mostly about a malfeasance, misfeasance kind of standpoint, not necessarily using it as a tool or crutch move forward. But this is just more guidance to make sure that we are letting our employees know that this is how it's supposed to be used in the township, if it is used, which of course, at this point, we don't have any tool sets in the township, but we are looking at possibilities. And of course, with those opportunities come forward, there will be public agenda items before anything is rolled out. The other ones are more of just vehicle, mobile phone type use policies, just things that we didn't have in our actual employee manual. And then one of them was, it was an adopted and approved leave policy update from last year that just wasn't formally adopted per resolution, but it's been in practicum now for over a year. So that's just more of a backlog to kind of clear. But all this to say, if you have any questions about anything, please let me know.
Thank you, Chris. Is
Did I
there,
capture that? Okay.
is there a motion to approve the amendments to the New Garden Township Personnel Manual?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, we've got Resolution 2025-22, the plan revision for new land development.
Robert, I don't know if you want to quickly handle this. It's essentially more of a update for a sewer planning module, but I'll let Robert cover it.
It's just a general requirement from DEP, standard for the 147 Maple Lane. That's really all it is. Just a standard requirement.
That's the one where that we just worked on for the 20 feet or 5 feet, something like that.
With the easement
the
you're
easement,
talking about, yeah.
yes, okay.
Mhm.
Can I get a motion to approve the resolution for the plan revision for new land development for 147 Maple Lane?
Yep. I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Robert. Next, we've got New Garden Hills Park Structures.
Okay. So good evening once again. This is another continuation of some of the ongoing conversations about future implementation feasibility for the revised concept plan for New Garden Hills. Obviously, for those more familiar with St. Anthony's in the Hills, but it's one where, other than really just kind of letting some of these more sizable, untenable aspects of the property sit into their current state into perpetuity, it's one where there was interest to possibly seek outside investment for possible amenities in alignment with the park master plan, in alignment with that area of the township, to be able to see if they could be reverted into an adaptive reuse of something that would be more amenable use of a commercial function inside of a public park, more family kind of oriented amenities as well. Real quick, I don't know if I have to kind of dive into the details about the history of the park, as most people would understand. Former clay pit, former youth campsite, and now township-owned eyesore. So it's one where it's had kind of a significant amount of, we'll call it permutations of planning around it, but it's one where the planning kind of came to a head when we did the kind of financial scoring of the 2021 YSM master plan, where even within that master plan, they were speculating, estimated wise, about, this is in 2021, about 15 to 18 million worth of expense. It didn't fully engineer and think about the things that we're going to talk about today as added components to that one. So when we updated the master plan in very early of 23 and had that update for the park, it was actually over $30 million in terms of that net cost for this part of the park. So of course, we took that 30 million kind of larger framing of it and basically dropped the price by about 80% of what can be considered more implementable for the township's purposes. And of course, that led to a lot of conversations, even with, obviously Stonewall Capital was in here earlier this evening, about possibilities for partnerships to improve certain aspects about the park, as well as get some seed funding to help activate the park space as well. So with that, this is just more legacy information about the history of the site, but all in all, it was a net $1.5 million purchase. Very different in terms of normal ways we do things with grant matches. This was primarily a fee simple purchase. So we just bought this thing with open space dollars. So with that, and of course, it is an outdoor amenity. All the structures are pretty much and primarily outdoor. And when we did that YSM study, everything was talking about passive uses and that kind of outdoor access to open space properties. And then we built that larger like activation plan around it that didn't fully align with some of the inputs that were coming from vendors. So what we're doing is basically kind of honing in on those kind of implementable aspects of the property from a township perspective. And we're right now currently looking at resourcing for getting some seed funding for the park. Contribution from White Clay Point developers is one aspect of it. Grant funding is another. We have the ability to liquidate a few of the assets from other aspects around the township, as well as the actual existing structures on the property today, which include the pool, the parking lot, and some of these other structures. The turnover of those uses from a potential person coming in and saying that they're going to purchase and rebuild them is revenue that we can then reinvest in to complete the park plan. And you can see the net reduction essentially. This is the YSM plan. This is what we provided in a public meeting. And I think that was in September, Mike, was that? In terms of the kind of pared down version. And the reason it's even still for a park about 5.2 million is because that pervasive property, it's almost 50 acres. And just if you do something over a large swath area, just prices mostly for the most part add up, mostly about access and trail pathways throughout the park. And you can go to see that full brief if you haven't been able to sit through it. It's been recorded on the township website as well to kind of go back and get all of the details about that revised plan in terms of all of the line item details and the phasing there. But one thing we did kind of allude to is how do we take these particular components of the park, kind of pick them up and move them to a bucket that could be invested in, because these are all also purchased with open space dollars. But within the actual construct of the, I believe it was the final covenant agreement, these are considered non-protected areas because they're all impervious spaces. They're net cement structures. So you do have the ability to kind of call these non-protected areas that cannot be defined as their properties within open space areas that may or may not be. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, going through that core process to basically create that non-protected area that could be purchased through a public process as well, with the intent to rehabilitate them into a more adaptive reuse. But yes, they were talking specifically about these key structures, as well as, I think in addition to that one, we have this scout building up here on the kind of western side, tucked away. And then there is a out facility right along Limestone Road. We call it the outhouse essentially, but it's just a shed, essentially a large shed. And I think that entails the 7 total assets on the property that we're talking about. So one thing that we think is a positive part of this is if you do have successful activation of the main kind of interior area of the commercial aspect of White Clay Point, you can then build access directly down into the property. And people kind of disassociate White Clay Point and New Garden Hills, but they're kind of joined at the hip. And there's a feasible path to get direct access off of Route 41, which is one of the contribution agreements that was approved in that settlement agreement to build that direct access in off of Route 41. And we'll still have the legacy Route 7 access, but this would become the primary artery to get in and out of the park. That's helpful because it's on the biggest thoroughfare we have, and it's one where it's associated with kind of a large stopping point. It's not like you'll have branding and wayfinding and signage right off of Route 41 to get into the park. So that was kind of the connection point there, which is very helpful. And then I just alluded to the fact that the White Clay developer has been supportive of basically helping develop some resources to get into the park via agreeing to give about $1 million worth to be able to basically build this roadway right here down into the park, as well as some seed funding in the tune of about 1.6 million as well. So we would take these resources as well as other additional resources to kind of build out that funding plan, if you will, because a master plan without a funding plan is essentially something that's going to kind of collect dust on your shelf if you don't have something actively able to infuse funding into it to get it done. This is one where we did have the prior plan to also get a third access point, so you'd have Route 7 and 41, and there was Reynolds Road, but this was updated and this was removed, and it's basically just a security type access for emergency responders, but that was removed from the concept plan, so that's going away. So it's going to be 2 primary entrances, and that was after some significant discussions with the Somerset Lake community. So with that, here are the 7 assets that we're talking about. I did mention most of them, and of course this one with the scout structure and the out structure on Route 7 that basically go into the collective pool, if you will, and it's one where it can be kind of as flexible as you want it to be. So right now, the first thing to focus on is essentially the agreement to say that this is the determination we want to seek on the property, going down this path, because it's a court-specific type process. Winnie can provide some clarity to what that means. And then after you get that rendered decision, then you go into, okay, now we don't have this as kind of, constraint number 1. Constraint number 2, which is more of a process, is you go into the public RFP solicitation for development services, and you basically put it out on the market and go, who is interested in doing something here? And you would try to market that to as many kind of local or regional types of people who would be looking to kind of organize and develop a business plan, and they would come through and bid. They could bid on just 1, they could bid on all 7. That's per them. I kind of like to think of it like set the conditions and let the other side be creative with them, and then you get to determine how much you like their creative kind of plans as well. So it gives us, number 1, flexibility, and 2, ultimate final say. So nothing happens unless we agree to it. So that's one thing too. It's good to own all the assets because you hold all the cards, but we would have to go through that in a public process. So this is just more for tonight's purpose. Number 1, agreeing with this approach, because otherwise we don't have a management plan to do these reversions or activations ourselves, because these are the significantly higher cost items of the overall park. But we know that based off of all of these discussions, that they're collectively add-ons and features of the property. It's just ones that as a township, we don't have the means to do it ourselves. So with that, tonight's motion is essentially approval of entering into that court process to get these items unprotected, essentially, from the purchase of those assets from open space. And then we'll come back later at a future date, depending upon how long this process takes, because that's one where Winnie can also provide some clarity. It's not it depends. It depends on a timeline. But the good news is we're not in a rush. This can be a slow burn process. So any questions?
Yeah. the building footprint. So basically, that's all we're doing. And someone could take that building footprint and remodel it, remove it, as long as they stayed within the confines of the existing building footprint, we would be okay. And I guess that's the idea, right?
There are, all of these locations were excluded from the grant easements.
Correct.
So and it's an area, not just the footprint of the building, but an area around them.
Right.
And that is what we would seek essentially to subdivide off or have an RFP and have somebody operate. But because it is a park, the law just really requires us to get Orphans Court approval to unpark it, as it were.
And this would be, like you said, just if we're successful in getting the relief from this, then you would put RFP out to solicit.
Yeah, well, not even just me, we would come together and have like these are proposals that we could put out there so we could even do kind of a crowdsourcing function as well. It can be as collective or as structured as possible. I don't think the township has pursued this type of option before, so it's unique. So it's one where we kind of can like make the rules of how we want to do that process publicly as we go along, but knowing that these are the kind of the hard constraints that we have to go through in order to get to that ultimate other side. And like I said, that can be as flexible and open or structured as possible if you have kind of a unique vision or something, but it would just be also one where you have to consider the market, because someone's going to come in with outside dollars and they're going to probably want some sort of flexibility around that, which is also a big aspect of this is right now we can start kind of getting some inputs about what we would want to see there, what kinds of amenities you want there to start. But
So the park, the $5 million, how much of that is active and how much of that is passive recreation?
really, it's just the hub that is that, I won't call it active, but essentially it's like a place-made kind of space. It's the ability to kind of open up the areas around the ponds to have active access to them for any sort of kind of programming and or I don't call it like fishing type program. Like essentially it's just kind of more outdoor active management from that perspective. So playground spaces, pavilion spaces, things that people wanted to be able to implement kind of active pathways for kind of wellness and fitness types of stuff, but not necessarily like opening up like a township ice cream store or something like that, because we would have to basically do all of those improvements, hire all the staff. Basically, it's a much more sieve on resources if you do something like that. And it's not to say we couldn't, it's just that we've never done it before. And I would imagine that would be a pretty big effort to get that lift done.
Right. So what would you theorize the benefit to the township would be to selling these properties or leasing them or just activating them, or is there any other further?
It's activation as well as, there's no management plan to keep up with the depreciation schedule of these assets. So if we don't do anything, they will, and we don't invest into them, they will just continue to deteriorate, of which some of them already have. So with that, it's either A, kind of out of sight, out of mind, I don't know, but if you're going to have active space around this, people are going to be walking adjacent to these crumbling structures. And it's just one where you have this rollout vision of a plan where it's like, hey, enjoy nature. And then within it, you have this almost like kind of apocalyptic kind of set of structures in there as well. So it doesn't really create a family environment and people want to go to something where it's, not necessarily cleaned up, I guess is the best way to put it. We want to make it seem clean, make it seem safe. And the only way you can do that is if you have active use of the properties within the property. Otherwise, it's you just would do like a resurfacing and then just close everything and it would just be a shell kind of function there. So, if you want to come up and name, address, and make a.
My name's Mark Ridinger. Is there any real long-term interest that the township has in keeping that as a park?
Yes, per the protections of the open space property, that's one where, you could do it for the whole property, but the whole point was to lessen the impact of significant growth by preserving large swaths of open space. So
Okay.
in terms of other developments here, I don't think that's for me to say. It's mostly a policy decision from the board and the community.
Has anybody else suggested interest in that property?
In terms of today, no.
So I got,
Yeah, it's kind of one where you don't know who's interested until you put it out on the market to someone who's interested in too. So that's part of it as well. It could turn out that no one's interested and we just have, this our plot, and then we would just have to update our plan, but this is just the next chunk of it.
Raise them.
But I do think with the appeal of White Clay, some of the improvements for infrastructure in the surrounding areas, and the fact that it would be considered a potential unique business opportunity, I can't imagine there would be zero interest in as well. But it might not be 100% what we want, but at least it's something. And really, in this case, it's also just the alleviation of significant capital liability from the township for these specific structures. We did explore potential discussions about lease agreements. It's just one where the rollovers in terms of if I'm a business owner and I'm going to invest probably a significant amount of capital into a structure that I don't own, I don't know if I'm going to be very comfortable about the longevity of that plan because things change over time. And it's one where leaving it constrained might inordinately skew interest away from it. So you would want to leave it as what is the best conditions. That would be acquisition and improvement. And then from there, it's one where if that doesn't work, then you could do lease. But it's kind of like go with the most open type approach and then kind of funnel it in.
And once we sell it, what would be the mechanism for ensuring that it's maintained and kept up in the way that we want it to be?
That's in your final agreement. So essentially you can be as tough of a negotiator as you want to make sure you're protected as a township. This isn't just get in there and rip it kind of thing. It's going to be very meticulously understood that they have to keep up with any semblance of agreement status of it. Otherwise, they would have liability as well if they didn't upkeep it. So if you put that provisional clause and they don't want to have that in the agreement, then maybe they're not the group for you. So however you want to protect the outcome, that's 100%. Like I said, owning the asset gives us significant leverage in this process as well. So we can make it however much we want to make it protected in terms of making sure that they do a good job and they continue to keep it in good condition as an operating business. And then it's one where if they end up having an issue with their own business plan and something goes awry, you would still have a improved asset that could be, kind of permit crad by somebody else. But right now, like the existing state, this is kind of what you're stuck with. So what does it say? Something's better than nothing.
Do you have any questions about the Orphans Court procedure? It's just, the law just says if it's a park, and I think this is considered a park, these pieces, that you have to get Orphans Court approval before you unpark it, as it were, before you remove it from the park.
Sure.
Chris Robinson, quick question. The parking lot, is that, how does that function to the residents who want to come in and park? Is that part of the Orphans Court, the parking lot?
It is. Anybody who builds a commercial structure is going to want dedicated parking for it. So
Okay,
in
so,
terms-
but suppose the residents just want to come in and drive and park there, can they park there?
Yeah, I mean, that would be into an agreement. You could have it as a public lot. You can keep it as a ground lease agreement.
As-
There's a lot of different ways.
That would be the only parking area for,
Not the only parking area. Part of the township's revised master plan has a parking area in the hub area, right near the planned kind of hub and castle area. This would be if you have an amenity here, much like any other commercial business, they would want to have dedicated parking. That would be my understanding, but it's not one where it's private parking.
and then picking up on Dave's question, on a percentage of 137 acres, how much of it would be Orphan Court?
It would be, basically, you would carve out like almost to the T, the meets and bounds of all of the structures.
Yeah.
So
okay.
essentially, it's like anything that's like a grass blade kind of outside of it is still maintained as an open space, conserved property owned by
Yeah,
the
I got that
township.
part, yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it bleeds over
I'd
to the
have
open
to
space. Right?
basically, we'd have to get all the meets and bounds established, and then it's not like we're gonna do this without maybe a follow-up type review. We would-
Yeah, of course. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's to minimize any sort of net loss of it, yeah. Sure.
And Folds, just a quick question. Would you consider putting easements on the historic house so it retains its tradition?
That's a policy decision more so for anything. And I think I didn't mention that the house was part of those list of assets as well.
I think this is just preliminary to get started, with nothing specific as to any particular asset.
Yeah, my question was, would you consider it?
Yes.
No,
Okay.
yes, that makes sense, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And possibly the barn for me
Yeah.
as well.
It's kind of a clunky proposition because right now this is essentially just to go through the unencumbrance, but then you have a second process, which is who wants this stuff? Essentially, you're just kind of having like a yard sale, if you will. It's like, okay, cool, we put this out there. What's the active interest into it? You know, and then from there, making it kind of like a Venn diagram of possible outcomes, but we won't know that until we get through that, but we can't do that until we do this.
Great, thank you, Chris. I'll read the motion. So it's a motion for consideration to approve the seeking of orphan court and/or county or Commonwealth approval for the sale of certain parcels in New Garden Hills containing structures and other improvements which are not open space. Is there a motion to approve such?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Next, we've got the New Garden Park Pavilion.
And excuse me while I just get the presentation back up. So for this one, there's no actual presentation material. Pavilion 2, which is the secondary one, the pavilions towards the rear part of the parking area. It says it in the staff recommendation, just has some needs for repairs, kind of a lot of leaks coming through. It's been, what, how long has that thing been there? So it's just due for some redressing, if you will. So this one is one where we do have remnant funds that can be allocated to the effort, even by the end of this year, within 2 existing funds dedicated for building maintenance and improvement. So it seems like a worthy investment, considering pavilion use at New Garden Park is one of the kind of more active programs that we have for, you know, people have family events and everything. So this would hopefully keep it in good condition for the next 20.
Thank you, Chris. Is
And
there a
I'll-
motion to approve the proposal from JRJ Construction for an amount not to exceed 18,450 for New Garden Park Pavilion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, is it the Kenny Show? The Bucktoe Road Stormwater Pipe Replacement?
So just so everybody knows, this was kind of dovetails off of a prior agenda item that was addressing the stormwater pipe collapse, which was the causal factor of the Bucktoe Road sinkhole issue that we had, obviously due to the significant level of saturation that occurred in the township in July. It's just one where the original plan kind of went out the window when we finally dug the asset up, and it was different than inventoried. And so that's where I'll kind of kick it over to Kenny to kind of better describe some of the technical details. But what we're doing is essentially a pipe replacement, if you will. So without further ado, and I just have some images up from some of the scoping images from the.
That sums it up. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so back in September, we ordered the replacement pipe for Bucktoe Road. We had what we thought was a 42-inch corrugated metal pipe. We based our calculations for the snap tight off of that. The opening was 42, so in the inlet box, so we didn't go any further than that. In hindsight, I guess we should have checked other spots because they used what I can only consider creative engineering and had a piece of 42-inch pipe transition to a piece of 48-inch pipe. That was the rest of it. How they did it, I don't know. I don't know if they cut the bottom and flared it out or what, because we found no concrete or debris in there. And the way the bottom of the existing pipe was rotted out, we wouldn't have seen if they cut it down the middle. So I've stopped asking questions at this point. So long story short, instead of going from 11,000 gallons,
Just real quick, if you could just, how long had that Bucktoe Road pipe been in place?
so the name that was carved into the inlet box was Augie Testa, and I think 70s, probably early 70s or so,
Late 60s.
late 60s, early 70s.
So if you can understand probably the level of details left over, you're dealing with breadcrumbs from 50 years ago that you have to make a technical decision on based off the information you had. So that's how it was put into our inventory system as a 42-inch pipe. So the air is really just on the level of detail from a very old pipe that unfortunately, kind of like an old house, until you start ripping off the sides of the walls, you don't really know the issue that you have until you see it. And that's what happened here.
Can we get Mr. Testa here to explain himself?
I know how he did it.
Yeah, I'm more interested in how he did it, not why he did it. The good thing is that pipe isn't completely wasted once we take it out. As you can see in those pictures there, that is a pipe from Willow Street that is collapsed and caved in and has joints that are disconnected. It goes underneath the railroad tracks, across private property, and into a huge inlet box. So that needs to be replaced as well, which I don't really feel like digging up underneath railroad tracks. That sounds like a huge pain in the butt to me. So we can repurpose that pipe to we can repurpose a couple sections of that pipe to reline that. And then the picture on the right is a 42-inch pipe on Patrick Lane that goes underneath that. That's about 10 or so feet deep. So we can reuse some of that in that location as well. And that math checks out. Since the issue, when we measure pipes, we make sure we measure it in as many spots as we possibly can now, just to eliminate this issue in the future.
So what we're also in the phase of doing right now is just taking a pretty significant undertaking is, and we've alluded to it, which is essentially kind of like a critical repair capital assessment of all stormwater hardware, essentially, if you will, throughout the township, not just pipes, but also like inlet boxes, anything that has kind of an active component of management of stormwater that doesn't exist today. So we're having to build this thing from scratch. So it's a lot of scoping. It's a lot of basically doing some sort of like grade of the condition in order to build that 5-year stormwater asset management plan in terms of rolling 5 years that we would attach to our capital plan. But until then, right now it's manifesting in big rain event. Then you find out if you have a collapsing stormwater pipe, and that's reactive. We want to be more proactive with it. Also to better to understand kind of the need and necessity to scale capital revenues to address those matters as well. And of course, these are pipes that are not cheap. And we have a lot of corrugated, as a percentage of all pipes in the township, I don't know how many would be existing 50-plus-year-old corrugated metal pipes, but they're starting to actively fail more and more and more.
These on the screen are not 50 years old.
No.
No, that's what I was going to say. Those are not 50 years old. They are less than 50 years old. And back in 2015, give or take a year, we had a bad storm that washed out pipes on Egypt Run. And when I was looking back in the files to figure stuff out, we had replaced those pipes about 10 years before that because they had rotted out, and they rotted out again just that fast.
Another thing to understand is the reason the pipe's width as it exists today is based off of essentially an understanding of a changing situation. So what would be a 42-inch demand 50 some odd years ago, the math and the actual grading of stormwater kind of capacity has changed, not necessarily even from the technical side, but also the fact that we're having larger weather events more frequently now in the township. So it's one where we would probably even need to take a 42-inch pipe and make it a 48-inch pipe at some point, just because we just have more water flowing through it. And that's also what we're looking at, and which is why it's taken a long time with Pannoni and Public Works team to kind of establish that renewed, purposeful master replacement plan for stormwater management hardware. And it's one where we're always going to be in the stormwater management infrastructure business, because we have a large array of watershed and tributaries and areas underneath all of our infrastructure. And you never know when you're going to get that one event that just stress tests that piece of infrastructure that much, because as soon as it goes not into the pipe and around the pipe and over the top of the road, and it's to a level where it degrades it just much, then you have road blowouts, and now you have a much more expensive problem to deal with, which is now you don't longer have a road. And that's what we want to avoid. So that's the reason we want to do this stuff and get it right.
And then to add to that, a lot of the developments that we, not a lot, but the developments that we have that were built in the 80s and the 90s, they use the corrugated metal pipe. So a lot of them are failing because of the age. To add to having to just replace the pipe, you also, a lot of them are underneath curb, so you have to dig out the concrete curb, then finally dig down, replace the pipe, and then replace the concrete curb when you're done, which adds just another expense to it. If you end up doing either a snap tight lining or a direct bury replacement. There are things we're looking into with Pannoni with like cure in place liners and stuff like that where you don't do any digging, but that's a case by case basis on whether or not you can use them in all location, in each location.
So for the purpose of tonight, this is a planned purchase that we won't have active until January 1st, FY26. But to get the pricing for today, because if we waited on it, essentially would increase year over year from just like a calendar date switching. So that's the reason that we're doing this tonight, as well as, we have a immediate, complete, we'll call it expenditure for our stormwater pipe replacement line item. So we would pull additional funding from our planned paving program, and we can find kind of all, we think of it like value engineering. We can find value in the larger kind of 1.2 million dedicated budget in the capital fund to find 40 grand to match the need to be able to get the pipe in the ground with the labor. So that's kind of the we'll call it the financing from two different GLs in the budget for next year.
Great. Is there a motion to approve the purchase of the snap tight pipe from LB Water in the amount not to exceed $91,530?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Great. Next, we've got the township
Thank you.
manager. Thank you, Kenny.
Kenny.
Next, we've got the township manager employment agreement. So the board needs to consider to approve the renewal of Chris's employment agreement for fiscal year 2026 and 2027. I mean, personally, I think Chris is doing a super job. He was a great hire 3 years ago.
There's
I don't
no
think you're gonna
input
make a
from me for
comment
this
on that.
one, so it's just if you have any questions for the solicitor.
Board have any questions for Winnie?
No.
No? Great. Can I have a motion to approve the renewal of the employment agreement?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we've got the manager's report on the Hiles property.
So this is the last item. I kept this one as a manager report item because there's no recommended motion for any. Consider this because more of a fluid discussion about kind of a management plan for the Hiles property. I lost my clicker. Oh, there it is. All right. But it's one where, unlike some of the other purchases of open space properties that had kind of larger, detailed kind of park master plans, the Hiles property was more of a purchase for its catering it towards an initiative around trail access and getting trail established as a continuation for our White Clay Creek Preserve kind of trail system that we have down the southwest part of the township. But with this, with that acquisition came the fact that it's a property with kind of like we talked about New Garden Hills, additional structures, in this case, a home, a barn, there's like a fishing shack on there on the property as well, a couple out structures where, you know, with the intent to secure the property for access for easement for trails, you are now also the owner of a house. So it's like, you know, just management of the asset moving forward. So just a quick update for those not familiar. This was an acquisition finalized in December of 21. Of course, there were approaches to this, so it kind of started around that late 2010s, 2019, 2020 period for applying for all the grants and kind of getting everything ready for the actual final acquisition. But with that, we got grant protections from the county and DCNR that kind of established verbiage around how we were to leverage the property for the what was it going to be, which was the manner to maximize public access consistent with respective uses. I won't read the rest of that, but essentially it's just kind of like we have for all of our open spaces, is getting people onto our open space properties for the benefit of having the ability to get out into some of these unique areas that we have in our township. But with that, kind of the one kind of missing piece is, you know, we didn't really have immediate plan for some of the other aspects of the property outside of just the intent to establish a trail. So you have to manage a trail, you have to manage a need to refurbish a barn, you have to continue kind of active use of the house, because if you don't use the house over time, it's going to go into a state of disrepair if you're not using it. And of course, we've had some discussions in the past about having to recondition the house to kind of keep it up to an active and usable asset, but no real significant need of the township to maintain that. So it's one where we're kind of still stuck in that. What do we do with this house? What do we do with the kind of residential structures on the property when we didn't really intend to do anything with them as a township? We wanted the land for the trail. So with that, we started looking at, well, if we want to use the house, what does it mean to use the house? Well, it means to have a commercial or public activation of a highway or driveway permit from PennDOT, because this is a PennDOT road. And that's one where we couldn't get that because it's going from private to a commercial public use. You need to upgrade that permit, which means you need to make a change along Penn Green Road in terms of the line of sight distances. And of course, if you've ever been in that area of Penn Green, the curvature of the road dictates that you have to do some serious grading along the eastern side of it specifically. And of course, that's pretty much a hard rock feature. So grading in this case requires like blasting kind of stuff, or more so than just kind of excavation. So the cost of that, this was our Bowman analysis, which is our transportation engineer, was pretty significant. It's going to be at depending upon the amount of blasting, about a $1.4 to $2 million project. So with that, you're essentially like reshaping Earth as you're going up there. And that was a public document that was in a prior conversation. I think it was towards the end of last year. So that level of effort has never really changed. So it's one where you can't really use the on-site properties as public accessible because you can't upgrade the actual condition of the permit. And even if you were to get the wavering of PennDOT, if you wanted to do that, you're still assuming the risk and liability by having an undercapacitized driveway for public use. So even from an insurance perspective, you're still liable. So that's one where ultimately accepting that risk. If you're going to be driving more people to this property, you're increasing the odds of a bad outcome, and you're on the hook for it because you wanted to have more public access to the property, but you didn't want to pay the tab to actually make it consistent for public use there. So with that, it's one where ultimately, even with the terms of the language for the application of the grant, that practical nature of the property is one where it's not necessarily fully fit for purpose for using on-site components of it. However, I believe there was some discussions about, you know, positive aspects of the house and really just kind of liking that intact nature of the property. It's also one where if we are on the hook for it, it's just stuff that adds up cost over time, especially if it's actively used, because we're the landlord and people, you know, as you live in a rental property, you know, appliances need to be replaced. It's just kind of an incremental amount of just always a demand and a need. So it's one where we also own not just one house, we own 4 right now. So we have to compete with other places that also from other aspects of acquisitions of open space properties. So it's just one where it's just another demand for resources. And really, this is, if you remember the open space fund allotment, one is for maintenance of personnel. If you also consider the need to implement park initiatives while also having remnants amounts of funds to be able to continue doing open space, this pulls away from the ability to do that. It's adding in, it's knifing into your capacity there. So it only degrades our ability to purchase property when you're having to spend more resources on the properties that you have today. So from a management standpoint, it's not really in alignment with what we're trying to do here from a staff recommendation. So with that, I don't think it's beyond kind of anybody's comprehension that this has always been part of a larger trail system network. That's in our trails prioritization plan and our greenways plans. It's in our comprehensive plan. Everything points towards we want more trails, or we want to have improvements along trailways and establish more networks to get people to access these properties. So with that, you know, that's would be in terms of a potential outcome, looking at all the potential scenarios. So the way I like to think of it is low to higher cost, less active use, more active use, but essentially thinking of permutations or situations where what is an outcome for this property? Because right now we don't really have a guidance or a policy or direction of how you want this ultimate end state to be. We're just kind of muddling through, and that's not necessarily helpful for staff because we want just some sort of input of final direction. So then we can build it for a purpose and make it kind of what it's supposed to be. So with that, you do have the ability to kind of divest from the initial purchase, but also maintain the trail easement on the property. You can kind of what you would do with the prior discussion item for New Garden Hills. You would go through that court process. You would have to sell the property. You would sell the property with all the structures obviously intact. You would sell it with the intent to keep the trail easement on the property so we can guarantee access to the property. And of course, that would be a specific type of owner that might be interested in doing that. And then you'd have to take those proceeds from the sale. You'd have to reimburse the grants and reimburse the open space fund. And then from there, just whatever kind of remnant amount you would potentially have would go back into the open space fund. But it's one where if the mindset was, well, we wanted the trail in the first place and we want to keep the property intact, you know, that would be where you would probably be interested in doing it. One is, you know, maybe you just want to maintain the whole property, but per the terms of the grant, it talked about demolishing the house. Then you would go with the demolish a house, which kind of eliminates that capital component to it in terms of just, you know, actively having to manage a house. But you would still have to pursue public access through another trail section because public access on the site is not feasible, at least not feasible if you're not invested in, not going to invest the funding to get it kind of up for par. So everything kind of is in alignment with that. Option 5 is like, if you wanted to align with the grant, this is kind of the grant aligned program, which comes with the responsibility that you have to do that grading project because that's per the terms of the grant to get the parking on the existing footprint where the house is today. Or it's just, you know, kind of the full active management plan. You go full bore because you not only have to activate the driveway, you also make sure that the parking is available because you no longer have the parking site on the site for the house, or the houses, excuse me, will be, you'd have to establish it elsewhere in order to create that public access. So that increases the cost estimate for that one as well. So this is kind of the spectrum, and the way I think of it, everything, I like to kind of put things in decision type matrix. It's either, do I value the house or the property? Yes, no, or both. I didn't see an outcome where we would value the house and not value the property, so I didn't put that situation here. But it's one where essentially it goes down to what is your ultimate interest and values lie. And it's really one where the clarity is really, if you go back through the historical terms of the grant, why we invested in the first place, from a staff-led perspective that also wants to keep costs down. It's about keeping the trail access in place to get people into that area of the township. And then from us, it helps us not to have to overextend ourselves and feed more resources into a property that doesn't necessarily achieve a check in the box of a township outcome, if that makes sense. So I wanted to, I think that's kind of it, have that kind of conversation. And this isn't one where you need to make a motion tonight. It's just to get that sense of guidance. And then we would come back with the same kind of motion and language for what it means. We just need to know which way to go. So that's all I really have planned for talking about it tonight.
How would you connect the trails, Chris?
Great question. So I probably should have put it in the brief here, but I can try to pull it up on Chesco, but it's not a great view of it. But we own this track here. It's the Phelps tract. And they're going to get it done this week, but essentially there is the ability to establish a trail network that's kind of up here around the trailhead for the Laurel Woods Trail. You would similarly kind of go across Penn Green, but on the eastern edge of the White Clay Creek, and kind of basically toe the line along the White Clay by establishing, which I would imagine would be a pretty good hike because it's right along the White Clay Creek, to get to the, we'll call it the Indiana Jones Bridge, going across the White Clay there, into the Chandler Preserve. And it can either terminate there and come back, or it can cross over if we can figure out kind of a, I'll call it a fully assessed safety commissioning of the bridge structure to go across the White Clay Creek there. But that's for, in terms of getting access to the property, that's how you would bring it down. And then, of course, you know, the ultimate plan is to kind of daisy chain as many segments as you can possibly get together, which kind of establishes this larger level plan for kind of a more looped network in the kind of quote unquote White Clay adjacent townships, if you will. But we're just responsible for our part of it.
Yeah, the connection to answer your question was a long-term vision of where we would actually follow the railroad track that you can see there. So that would, if you want to put your red laser along the railroad track to,
Which
for
one?
right there, yeah. So continuing along that railroad track up to the north.
Yep.
Because that would connect to Laurel Woods more safe, or Mill Race, I'm sorry, more safely on the western side, because as we discovered, getting a permit from PennDOT to even put a pedestrian crossing is near on impossible, sans actual death.
That would be the one thing that we would have to get a better. So after our experience with establishing the Church Road crossing improvements across the two sections of the property for the golf course, is kind of coming up with a similar construct, because Church Road is obviously their road as well. Kind of trying to mirror that in terms of establishing a safe pedestrian crossing point, but having it be kind of up here for a potential, I don't know if it would be like a stop controlled intersection, but essentially a kind of a signalized pedestrian crossing, you know, flashing signs, stuff like that. And of course, there is parking. Obviously, we would just leverage the Laurel Woods parking lot to access both trails. Did I get that right, Mike? Okay, thank you.
I believe there's parking off of Hyde Falls too, on the top of the hill. There's two
Yep.
parking spots there. Then you would have to come down the hill and go across my favorite bridge. I did go across.
Oh, you're talking more so, yeah, okay, I know what you're saying.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, any other public comments on the? Microphone, just to make sure, yep.
Is a signalized crossing less expensive than all of the improvements you were
I
talking
can't
about?
remember how much it is going to be for part of the, so we have pretty, I'll call it more condition for the Church Road, because there's kind of like some speed kind of elevations and calming controls and stuff. This probably wouldn't involve that. Basically, it's number one is whatever you propose, PennDOT's got to agree to it because it's their road. But essentially, that part of it, my understanding is those aren't significantly expensive, just the signage on the side of it. If you wanted to kind of raise up the road, that's where your cost comes from. Yeah. But I guess it depends on the type of device and everything else that they choose. So it's really just what, I mean, like I said, no need to make a motion unless you feel comfortable to do so, because it'd be very similar language if you want to do the sell the house, or we can come back if you want to have a more prepared item with something intentional about it. But essentially, I don't know which one of these buckets you kind of are in alignment with.
I didn't have any questions, but I just had a couple comments. One was, have you appraised Cindy Hiles of what we're planning?
I didn't reach out. I can reach out though, but from the previous comments, it was just making sure that the house was being addressed, because I think it was more so the fact that we didn't have a maintenance plan there in place. And it's one where I don't think you could say that we haven't invested back into the property to kind of bring it up back to par. And any future usage of the house as somebody as a private residence would still kind of be in alignment with, you know, what it was used historically too.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine there would be anything, but yeah, I can absolutely.
It was just more of an update thing,
Yeah.
just to let her know that we're working on it, because
I-
these, yeah.
Because we've had so many
Or-
previous discussions, it's one where maybe having, instead of saying, hey, here's 7 possible things we're thinking about with the property, it would have a more of a, hey, this is kind of the direction we're going. So it could be more of a direct conversation, if that makes sense. That would be the way that I would want to be approached, so.
Well, speaking for myself and on behalf of the Historic Commission, we would like to see the property, the house, I should say, preserved.
Okay.
For, although it's outside of the 103 or so, I guess we're down to like 102, 101 houses on the list, because that only goes to 1900. That's one of the ones that they have taken a shine to,
Yep.
architecturally. Yes. Sold privately. Or so options 3, what was it on the matrix? 3, 4, 6, whatever it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
3, 4, 6.
You can sell the house and maintain the entire property, or you can
Right.
sell the house and just keep the trail easement, but the rest of the predominant 7.8 acres would go back to a private kind of surrounding property type use. It's really just whatever is the most amenable aspect of it. You're going to get less money if you preserve more acreage around it. You can get more if you do a larger tract area. We would just need to know kind of what we need for the trail easement component of it. What does that mean in terms of, once again, kind of the structured meets and bounds of the need for the trail?
So are you suggesting that we sell off more than just what would be needed for the house?
It could be whatever you want it to be honest. All I know is the only thing we do need is the space kind of right away for a trail,
Right.
which is what, maybe 10 feet across if you want to think about it, probably at the maximum. So
Yeah.
not a significant carve out, if you will.
Yeah, right. And that was kind of the whole point. Yeah. Yeah. Barkley?
Thank you, Barclay Hooks. I think some really in-depth search into the real history of the property needs to be done besides the Hiles, and I appreciate their love for it. And I read Richard Gall's press with Mrs. Hiles and the marriage and the love of the land. But I knew the previous owner before them
Mhm.
was Joe Allardyce and his wife. I forget her first name. But I have the documents in my pocket right now. If you were to go back in the archive minutes to the late 50s, early 60s, there was a civic association set up, and the main thrust at that time was to increase business in the township. But at the time, Joe Allardyce, who built that house with that panoramic view, and I was in there when my dad was assessor, and how much emphasis he put on. Plus, my girlfriend and I were in there in '65, and I looked at it. And just about 3 months ago, I looked at it again. But Joe Allardyce, back in about 1960, was appointed initially to plan and work with the dump, plus the water problem in Tufkenham. And then he was officially made the first engineer. And our planning commission and everything, I believe, started around 1960 through the Civic Association and his work. So I think that is really something that needs to be documented no matter what happens. If you have a trail, come into that area, the total history should be there, because the reason we're buying it, it's a beautiful piece of property. Not only that, I was on the board and we voted for that to be wild and scenic down through there through the federal government. And I don't know what setbacks are about or anything. And I think I probably have an old photo of the original footbridge way back when.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking you to do. And I do have the information. I'm not going to take your time tonight, but I can tell you where to go in the archives to document what I'm saying. And Winnie, you can call me down on this. But while we're sitting about inadequacies, I talked to Steve Alabin on Egypt Run Road and Penn Green, that daggone thing out there supposed to be safety oriented is being hit all the time, probably the fifth time. I don't understand that. What's the alignment of Egypt Run Road? I know I'm out of order to extent. Egypt Run Road now doesn't make any sense. It's narrow and tight in there. That thing's always getting busted. Costs a lot of money. Something's not aligned right there. And another thing, going back in those archives, talking about the reason those pipes are such the way they are, is the thriftiness, the frugalness of the people at the time. Because in those archive minutes, Augie Testa got an increase to $2 an hour for road foreman or superintendent, $2 an hour. Plus his truck was almost, $2 an hour. That might answer to why things are the way they are. Thanks.
Thanks, Barkley.
So what we can do if there's a consensus about kind of obviously approach where the house is intact, where goal is to kind of seek the trail as the primary initiative, we would go down one of these roads, probably either one or three kind of sounds like where people are landing on, and come up with a, because right now we don't have the details about how much tract area, some of those other things, but number one, then two, just getting some further clarity about reimbursements of the grants based off of how much you would be quote unquote selling back. So I wouldn't recommend anything to be decided upon tonight, other than, does it sound like some blend of one or three is kind of where everyone is going?
I'm at 6.
We can do it. Great.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think question for Wayne, if we do the Friday, Saturday,
I just want to make sure I just need a cross-section of a consensus so we can move towards creating an agenda item in the future that comes with a more formulaic motion to it. That's what I need from tonight, is essentially the direction you want us to go down.
Yeah, I'm good with 1 or 3.
Okay. Same.
Value for needs.
Okay.
agreed.
Okay. So what we'll do is essentially come up with more understandings about what that reimbursement means, about the unencumbrance of those assets, and then two, kind of what that net tract area differential will look like, kind of with more schematics, like this is where the trail easement will be. We'll kind of show it on the property map in terms of like, the actual frontage along there, and then just maybe even possibly get some updated appraisals on the property in terms of, well, we have the legacy ones intact because it wasn't that long ago, but if you think about it, this acquisition was in kind of the 2020 timeframe. So the real estate market has changed pretty dramatically since then. So I have no idea what the true net value of this property is today. So we would have to get that, but it sounds like it starts with just getting those details put into place, and then that future motion will likely get the input of what all those details are. But we'll also have to work with a real estate agent or consultant. I don't know what that means in terms of, can we just procure our own, or do we have to do something specific about that? But I just want to make sure.
We can contract with a realtor.
Yeah.
You could ask. For
Is there any limitations to that, conflicts of interest or anything else?
No, I don't think
from
so.
Pennsylvania side.
I think it's professional. You can select your own professional people.
Okay.
So you could put it out to bid if you wanted, but you don't have to. You can select a realtor that would make
You would want to go
sense for
through an
you.
active listing agent because they would have the ability to network and market the house appropriately to get
and-
the most amount of solicitations and inputs on it. And I guess the good news is we're going into the winter months, into the spring, so the buying environment here with predictable kind of mortgage rates being at least better than they were a year or 2 years ago. So we could have a good outcome here that reimburses the grant plus gives us a dividend of additive funds that we could address, like we were looking at for other parks initiatives as well. Potentially even money to implement the trail in the first place, which is helpful. And the pedestrian crossing stuff. So, because all of these are things that we don't have a targeted fund for today. And that's all I have. Any other questions? Okay.
Guess before we adjourn, any comments from the board?
I just wanted to, Chris Robinson, did you want to speak on the Historic Commission's, let's say, irritation about the barn being demolished?
I mean, again, this is regarding the signage?
No, the barn that was demolished along with the historic house, we had, granted that demolition permit with the understanding that they would demolish the house and retain the barn, and that turned
Yeah,
out not to be true.
asking for monies for the signage for the,
No, the Historic Commission wanted someone to convey their irritation to the board about the loss of the barn as well as the house. Yeah,
okay. I don't really recall that.
yeah. Peg was quite upset about it. So to make a long story short, the Historic Commission is very upset that the gentleman who we gave a demolition permit to what was probably
Oh,
at the
I'm
time
sorry.
the
Yeah,
oldest house.
right, you're talking about the Isaac Jackson house, right?
Yeah, the one.
Yeah,
the
that was
oldest.
quite a shock. That was
Yeah.
quite a shock.
With
Yeah,
the
we were
understanding that
just
they would at least.
very disappointed in that. This is the oldest house, so it was the township that stood, which the owner came to the historical commission explaining why they couldn't repurpose the house because it was so dilapidated and it was this tall, the ceiling.
Yeah,
Make the owner.
6 foot
install.
ceilings. Yeah,
But we had no idea that his intention was to destroy the entire barn. The barn, which is close to the school, it's off Newark Road.
Mhm.
It had two parts on it. One part that was rather dilapidated that could go off, but the original barn was in excellent shape. Excellent shape. And we just learned that it was gone. There was no communication with the historical commission about trying to preserve the barn. So we were kind of upset. Yeah, thank you. I kind of
I would like to encourage those who haven't checked it out, but the update to the zoning ordinance includes stronger protections for the historic structures in the township, because the existing ordinance is what the only kind of ability we have to even have we'll call it like a dialogue, but there's almost zero protections in the existing ordinance. It's kind of just like hey, we just need to stand in front of you to make this discussion point, but we don't have to listen to you guys at all whatsoever. So there's much more strong teeth in terms of, number one, if someone's on a property and not maintaining it as a historic inventory, but then two, adaptive reuse and outcomes around that as well. So want to make sure that it's not just zoning outcomes, but there is actual improvements to the existing historic ordinance as well.
But we had that dialogue, Chris, with the new owner, but we left the discussion concluded with that the old house is going to go, but the original part of the barn that stood well was going to remain. We were disappointed that he didn't have the gumption at least to notify either Robert or the historical commission. That's all. So, but thanks for bringing it up. My mind was thinking of the land warden, which is secondary. So,
yeah.
So, by the way, Panel Jones would be 100 in 2027.
Wow.
So we have to keep that in mind.
So as a board member speaking to the Historic Commission, I would encourage you to perhaps look at expanding your list of properties. If you want to include barns, I know we have the one barn, but obviously those structures make up part of the agricultural heritage of the township.
Should be easy. There aren't that many left. Okay, sure.
And if you want to expand your time horizon, while perhaps someone behind you that wants to join the Historic Commission, since he has a very helpful knowledge you could move so I can see him and make direct eye contact and say,
Oh.
hey, Barkley.
Chairman, and I got Peggy Jones to be probably the second one. She's been excellent. And the Jones family has been there. And I was thinking the Middleton house, Charles Wilson.
Yeah.
He's a, see, he lives in the community, and that's the difference. Living in the community, working with the people. See, he didn't tear that house down, the barn went. And I'm thinking the same way. That, the school owns that property, and I don't park the school because of Tracy in there, I know, to some extent. But that house was demolition by neglect by a public enterprise, which was wrong, didn't keep the weeds down. And that shed went down in 54 by Hazel, and then went down to Snow 58. That's what you said. The rest of it, just, you know.
Yeah. I want to speak to you for a few minutes after the meeting, but I'm going to make a motion to adjourn so I don't waste any of the others.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Kenny for the hard work yesterday for clearing the roads. What did we get, about 4 or 5 inches of snow? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Kenny.
Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?